This is Kerim Baran of SolarAcademy. I am here with Aliya Bagewadi of Allume Energy. Did I say the last name right, Aliya?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And you are in Chicago area, although you guys are a very global international company. And I am here in San Diego, and we're going to talk about Allume Energy, which is solving a major gap in the multifamily solar space, mostly, or multi-unit solar solutions. Um, but before that, Aliya, let's talk a little bit about your background. You are a well-educated young professional who has done many interesting things. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up at Allume.
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
that, Kareem. Um, I I guess I was always interested in issues of inequality and why do some have so much and many have so little. And that is a product of like having grown up in Chicago and also
Mhm.
spent my summers in India and seeing sort of the abject poverty that you can see in India and also the kind of the really tough conditions that people can face in Chicago that's like compounded by violence and many other
Mhm.
factors.
Yeah.
So in university, I studied kind of like the political dimensions of power and inequality. And then in my career, I pursued, I guess, different avenues that I thought would combat that these issues. So I worked as a community organizer, I worked as a teacher, I worked in microfinance, worked with smallholder farmers, international development, all these different things. Um, with the irony that I myself was also like saddled by debt from from
Yeah.
my time in college.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so that actually forced me to go into strategy consulting, which I'm glad I did because it was a lens into how power works in many ways, and like the
Mhm.
other side of
Mhm.
things. Um, and but once my debt was paid off, I kind of had this question: well, what do I want to do now?
Mhm.
And I wanted to go back into yeah, like trying to combat issues, really prevalent issues in society, in multiple ways. And I started my own consulting firm. Was meeting lots of different climate tech startups,
Mhm.
and I met the founder of Allume, and I really appreciated what they were doing. I thought it was, in a way, very simple. And in my mind, I was like, why is this not more prevalent? Why is this not
Mhm.
more common? People in apartments having access to solar. Why is that not? Why doesn't that?
Yeah.
It seems really simple. Um,
Yeah.
and in the course of working for the company, I've just seen like, oh well, things aren't really set up, and like here's how we have to make them set up. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
that's what drew me to Loom. And I guess it's like the intersections um, of like combating income inequality and trying to support clean energy usage.
Yeah. Makes sense. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about Allume and how that is solving that exact problem you brought up, which is, I mean, solar, which has been adopted by probably 10 to 15% of Californian households at this point, but mostly wealthy households, and probably 6% or so, maybe a bit more, a bit less of all US households. But if we do look at the multifamily apartment building space, um, those buildings are probably less than 1% penetrated, if not even 0.1% or 0.01% if you count all the tenant units. Because it's
Mhm.
really from the solar solution is such that if you put solar on a multi-tenant apartment building, it offsets the building's load, but the landlord generally has to pay for that solar, but the tenants are paying the electric bill. So it's quite difficult to make the accounting of that work for the landlord to get a payback on his investment or her investment. Um, and there are some solutions like yours that kind of solve that problem. Having said that, the few hundreds or thousands of buildings that have solar generally do it to offset their common area, but not for the tenant usage. And that's where solutions like Allume and also IV Energy and probably others in the market bring the solution to enable solar for the tenant, right? Am I summarizing that gap in the market in an appropriate way?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're underscoring what I would also add is like the enormous swath of the population that lives in multifamily.
Which is
And
40%, 42. I mean, it's
yeah,
40 million households out of 100 to 110 million households in the US, or maybe more. Yeah,
no,
absolutely. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean,
yeah,
it's a huge percentage that
yeah,
hasn't been served, as you're saying.
right.
Um, and these are also households that tend to be, not always, but tend to be lower income.
Yeah,
Uh, and, if you can find
yeah,
solutions multifamily buildings, the scale of impact is much more significant
yeah,
because there are so many, there's just a higher density of people
yeah,
living in these
yeah,
buildings. So it's one of those things where it's like, how hasn't there been like a wide
yeah,
solution yet? And then you kind of you look, beyond the layers and you realize, oh well, there is the split incentive issue where, as you're saying, the building owner makes the investment, but the benefits
right.
typically flow to the tenants, so that disincentivizes.
Yeah,
Um, and Yeah, I mean, and also just structural barrier. It was like very kind of um, what we can not what we are working towards is overcoming those structural issues in which
mm-hmm.
multiple, if you wanted residents to consume energy in multi-family buildings, you needed to have multiple solar systems per unit, which is really expensive. It's a ton of hardware. And with that split incentive issue, it's like, how's that going to happen? So that's
Yeah,
where Bloom comes into the picture. And I
mm-hmm.
think, it what's interesting about it is that it also, the technology was developed in Australia, which does have a much more mature solar market where
Mm-hmm.
30% of all homes
Homes.
have solar. And so the disparity was very obvious, like about, kind of 7 years ago. And
Yeah,
the way it's
yeah,
become more obvious now.
yeah. How is it that Australia has so much solar, by the way? I'm gonna do a side topic here, but it's, I mean, and also I've heard that it's like below $1 a watt that they make that. I mean, is it like below $1 a watt after certain incentives, or is it really $1 a watt to build and install the whole thing? Whereas we're paying like 225 to 350 here in the US market, mostly for resi solar.
I mean, I don't know the answer to all of that, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I do think there are plenty of government programs that do support the proliferation of solar
Yeah,
for what they call social housing, what we might call
right.
housing. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not like, labor is inexpensive. It may be even more expensive there, but they are able to have a lower cost per watt.
Mm.
But
Maybe it's just streamlining of things like we tend to optimize every system here, and there's, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of permitting districts with each of them with their unique rules and thousands of utility companies, each with their own interconnection
Mhm.
process. So like a lot of the soft costs add up here, obviously. And then
Yeah.
they also probably get Chinese panels at much lower costs, but still that's quite a quite a big difference. But yeah, they are more advanced in many ways.
Well,
But
and also the economics is stronger in
yeah, because their electric prices are higher.
very high. I think it's
Yeah.
like nearing 40 cents a kilowatt.
Which
I
is
think
what California is right now. I mean,
is it 40?
yeah, I'm paying. I just looked at my most recent bill, 40 cents, and I
Wow.
only consume 400 kilowatt hours a month. Yeah,
Wow.
my average is 40 cents. Yeah, I live
Wow.
in a relatively small home, apartment building, and I'm paying about $160 for 400 kilowatt hours a month, and most of that is distribution, of course, but it's crazy high.
Yeah.
And
But
and
and you don't
yeah, and your point is very appropriate because before I was living here, I was living in a much nicer, bigger home. and I put solar on it here in San Diego, close to the ocean, and I got a 3-year payback, 3.5-year payback on that. And that was 9 years ago,
Wow.
2015 or 16. I think I put it on December of 2015, and the math worked out to be, you know, because I was in the business, I was able to install it for relatively cheap price, like $2.50 or something like that. After
Mhm.
the ITC payback, I
Mhm.
was able to get a 3.5-year return on that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and but back then it was tiered pricing, and I was still paying in the 30 plus cents, which was quite high for back then. But and I was always thinking, okay, the wealthy or like the bigger homes, bigger consumers are able to get a really good return on this, but it was not possible to do that uh, in LMI settings.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, there's two things I wanted to say about that. And
mhm,
one is, if you compare, I do think California is a unique case, as is Hawaii, in terms of like just how high the rates are. But if you look at places like Georgia,
mhm.
or Oklahoma, or so some of
Yeah,
these states, it's $7 a watt, for
yeah,
electricity. So it's uh, the
yeah,
economics are a lot more difficult
sure, yeah,
to argue. And
right,
when you talk about the wealthier homes kind of having easier access as a result of the tax credits, I think what we're also trying to do is combat that narrative that solar
right, sure.
is just for
No, I
people on
mean,
the coasts, and I know that you're obviously part of that as well. But I think that's a really critical narrative that we're trying to change, that like this is not this is for everyone, and it can be for everyone. We just need to take these steps so that we can democratize access, and so that the people who need it the most are getting it.
yeah,
So that's really a big emphasis for us too, and I know also for Ivy as well.
right. So, okay, let's talk about Allume and SolShare and how it all works, like the product. Um, Maybe we can talk over a simple case study of a 10-unit apartment building that builds a 30 kilowatt system for $3 a watt. That's a $90,000 investment for the landlord, I assume. And that's offsetting probably, I mean, 30,000 that's a 30 kilowatt system will probably offset 45,000 kilowatt hours a year at, call it 20 cents value. $9,000 of offset, electric offset, which is great. Like and that's before ITC. So uh, you make a $24,000 investment essentially, or no, $90,000 investment, and you are offsetting, what did we say? 45,000, $9,000 of electricity, but you're really not making a 90,000 investment. You're making a 90 minus 27 because 30% off. So $63,000 investment, and you are saving $9,000 of electricity if you value the electricity at 20 cents, which is half of what I'm paying. So that could be almost double. But then how does that value that's created through solar attributed to each of the tenants? Like, do you guys have the hardware to distribute it equally to all the tenants, and then that is reflected on their meters? And do they get the net metering credits from the utility? How does that, how, like, those are the kinds of questions that I'm sure any installer partner or any apartment building owner will have for you guys.
Yeah.
And so do I.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. These are the important questions, and it's
Yeah.
also helps to um, understanding it helps to locate us within the market too,
Right. Yeah.
because we've been talking about the different options that do exist, and where do we sit within that. Um, so I guess taking away the financials for a second and just
Hmm.
focus on the technical, the hardware side.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a 30 kilowatt system and 10 units. So 10 units
Yeah.
can actually connect up to one SolShare, which is our technology.
Hmm.
And that SolShare is going to take the energy from the 30 kilowatts and then allocate it, and basically we use an algorithm that tells the SolShare to send 3 kilowatts to every single unit. So it's
Got
actually
it.
physically pushing the electrons for consumption.
Yeah.
Uh, and so every single unit in that building is going to consume about or going to receive
3
3 kilowatts
kilo.
of solar. And that way we are different, very different than what else exists out there, because typically what exists out there is more of front of the meter solutions,
Yeah.
where you're gonna take a solar farm or a community solar project and then share the credits of what you're
Mm-hmm.
sending to the grid. Whereas what we are doing is we are behind the meter solution.
Yep.
That energy is actually directly going for direct consumption. So it's a lot less reliant on credits to the grid, which I think is important in many parts of the country where those credits are becoming worse. So yeah, we're fundamentally a behind the meter solution.
Got it. And does it have to be 3 watts equal to 10 units each, or can you change that percentage? And also, can some of that go to the common area load of the building too?
Yeah. So um, there isn't, it doesn't have to be set allocation. I was just giving that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Say that the building owner wants to max out their common meter first. We can do that and then send the excess energy to the resident meters.
Got
Um,
it.
or we can, let's say there's a unit that's significantly bigger, we can send more energy to that unit,
Then the
and
others.
then the others. And that can happen quite flexibly. So let's say like a tenant moves out. You don't need
Yeah.
to send energy to an empty vacant unit.
Right.
You can redistribute the
Right.
percentage.
And the landlord does that, I assume, through a dashboard, like a software dashboard.
Correct. Yeah. So the landlord has access to the allocation, and they also get access through the software to that renewable energy distribution data. So the solar distribution
Right.
data. How
So
much?
is that like a web-based dashboard? They log in and control, like set the controls there, or is it hard on the hardware itself?
It's actually software, and
Okay.
the software is controlling the hardware, right? So
Right.
yeah, what you tell the software for percentages is actually going to control
Yeah.
how.
And you do that on a web interface, and then that controls, so that there's some Wi-Fi connection, obviously, at the hardware level that connects to the internet and takes those
Correct.
instructions. Got it. And then how does the net, like the crediting, work with the utility? I guess
Um,
there, because if your meter is, it's one thing to offset your day load, but it's another thing, I guess, if your meter starts revert, like turning backwards. And so you're generating credits during the day. And then,
correct.
so I guess that there's a whole net metering complexity there for uh, is there for the master meter as well as the unit meters, sub meters, I guess, all that.
Yeah. So the way net metering works, how I think you were just saying about how every utility has its own way of doing
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
And so every utility
It's different.
will, yeah, will have a different way of doing things. But
And we
prime,
have thousands of those in the US.
yeah,
Fortunately or unfortunately, it is just the way US is structured, which is
yeah,
probably a good thing because um, definitely don't want one power system
right.
to be overtaken. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Well, so net metering is it can be done that the net metering can be done in the tenant's name,
Yeah.
uh, or in the tenant meter's name. So the meter that is related to the tenant, that will always be credited for what is being sent to the grid. So
Okay.
if let's say I'm a resident, I'm a tenant, I'm out at work, I'm not
Yeah.
consuming that energy, it goes out to the grid, it's exported to the grid. My meter is going to get those credits.
Credits.
And so that way you can, especially in places where net metering exists,
Right.
that is really ensuring that like, kind of everyone gets equal benefit.
So then that um what's that law, Kirchhoff's law or something? So then the building doesn't then take that 10% allocation of one unit and give it to the other 9 units. If you are at work all day and everyone else is working from home or running Bitcoin farms in their apartments, it doesn't take your 10% and give it to the other 9 units. It actually credits you your net metering allocation.
Yeah, in
Got it.
we do have iterations of the product in Australia
Yeah,
and Europe where that is a possibility where you can send energy
to the
in real
others.
time based on demand.
Right.
But given the net metering environment in the US,
Yeah,
we have it set up such that it would be that kind of more set allocation.
understood. Got it. And then how does the landlord recoup their investment from the tenant? Because the landlord is effectively creating a lot of savings for the tenant by making this investment. Do they create their own agreement between themselves and the tenant to do some accounting for all the kilowatt hours the system generated to the tenant's name and bill for that?
Yeah, this is a very important question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it allows the building owner to then become an um,
Mini power plant.
uh I don't want to say that, but I mean they
El
can
Electric generation facility, as
yeah
Trump calls them recently.
they can own an energy asset, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
by sharing that energy and providing solar to their residents, it depends on the laws in the state.
yeah.
Uh, so, but the easiest way to go about doing this is creating an amenity fee. So for providing residents this solar access, you create a fee, a flat fee that that tenants would get charged for that for access to the solar. And so for the resident, myself as a tenant, I would have a lower energy bill, and I would be paying a fee for access to that solar, and that enables the building owner to recuperate their investment.
Got it.
In states where PPAs are allowed, the building owner can
So
develop.
building owner knows approximately the value that's created through this setup. So then they create an amenities fee based on those, if they're 10 units, 10% each. So they know the value created, they break it into 10 and charge it as an amenity fee to the tenants, which
Correct.
is lower than their electric bill in
Correct.
all
Yeah.
pretty much all cases, I would think.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
makes
and, and
sense.
and we structure it that way. We
Yeah,
typically working with finance providers that are
right.
want to ensure that this is providing lower utility bills. So it's embedded um, into the structure of the
Yeah,
access.
makes
Um,
sense. Okay, that's clear now in my mind how you guys do it. And this yeah, it's a pretty straightforward way of doing it. So okay, tell me like how pervasive are you guys in the US market? Where have you gotten traction? What's working? What you would like to do next? How uh, if you could wish for anything from the universe, what would that be?
okay, well, let me say something before I forget.
Yeah,
Because you had asked about how does the building owner know how much each resident has gotten, or how do they create if they were to create a PPA, how do they know?
yeah,
And the software is actually reporting on all of that. So how much was delivered, how much was consumed, how much was exported, all relative to energy demand. So you
yeah,
can really get a strong picture of
yeah,
uh, what the solar is doing in the building.
yeah.
And that
But
helps.
that's after the fact, after installation. Like, so you gotta probably uh, get a PPA determined as you're installing, I would think, or before installation, because there could be a developer building this asset for the landlord, right? Or because landlords are not always owning and operating the assets, I would think. So there's a developer that builds and operates the asset for the landlord,
Mhm.
which the landlord then pays the PPA payments to that, but then turns around and gets paid from the tenants, right? Is that,
That's correct. Yeah.
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 And so, but with the, obviously with all the reporting of consumption and production and demand, and the various different bills you're getting from the utilities, I would think it's, after that, it's pretty straightforward to create the bills for the tenants.
Yeah.
Do the tenants need to sign up for this, or is just a offered thing for the building as you are signing your lease for the building?
It's actually an opt out, whereas like community solar is more of an opt
Right.
in.
Yeah,
Ours is a opt out solution. So if, for
sure.
whatever you don't,
Yeah,
want lower utility bills or you don't like solar, you can opt out.
yeah,
But otherwise you're within the system.
yeah.
Yeah.
Makes
But
sense.
I do want to get back to your question about our traction and our growth. And
Hmm.
yeah, as I mentioned, the company started in Australia, expanded to New Zealand first, then went to Europe, um, and we are now in the US. And what's interesting is that we first started out in the Southeast, where
Hmm.
energy burdens are really high, but the cost of electricity is very low. So in many ways,
What is really high? Energy what's?
energy burdens. So
Oh,
yeah, how much energy somebody is spending, how much of their income is being spent on their utility bill.
yeah.
So like an average, you know, average homeowner spends about 3% of their income on energy bills, but a low income renter can be spending 20% of their income on energy bills. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, it is genuinely a cycle of energy poverty that people are facing. Um, and and so yeah, I don't remember where I was going with that, but
Oh,
yeah,
you were talking about like why you are bigger in, or you started in southeast of the US.
yeah, so the need is very strong in the Southeast, but
Right.
the economics for solar are can be
Yeah.
challenging. But
Yeah.
luckily we were able to be working in places like Florida and Mississippi, where solar is just not that. I mean, Florida is a different case, but Mississippi
Hmm.
is really not that prevalent. But we were
Hmm.
able to show that you can still do it. You can still do these things in Mississippi, and you can show how solar is benefiting residents in predominantly red states. And I think that was really great, and I'm
Hmm.
happy for those stories. But and we are expanding into the Midwest,
Hmm.
and Illinois in particular has a really strong program for low income multifamily.
Hmm.
Um, there are very strong SRECs, state renewable energy credits, that are creating conditions in which payback periods are like 1 to 2 years for building owners. So it's just really strong economics. And yeah, we're really excited to be kind of unlocking this program with the technology.
And who are your partners in your go-to-market efforts? Are they more real estate developers, companies? Are they more uh, program managers like this SREC program in Illinois you mentioned, or utility companies, or just EPCs and installers? How do you manage that whole world of various different partners that you have to collaborate with to put these in?
Well, yeah, because we're so new to the market, and because um, nobody else is really doing what we're doing, we in many ways have to develop relationships with all of these folks, um, and go about kind of on our education campaigns that here's how
Hmm.
you do this exists, and then start putting people, bringing people together. Um, so ideally, we want to be working with solar developers that have the relationships to multifamily building owners. But that just, as we've been saying, is like a market that has been so underserved that
Yeah.
oftentimes we are creating those relationships, and working with the installers that want to be identifying new markets, are kind of thinking ahead, don't want just the cookie cutter single family home. Um,
Right.
so yeah, we are actively working with all of these different stakeholders, and with utilities. I mean, utilities play a really critical role in all of this. Um,
Hmm.
and for us, it's about identifying the utilities that have affordability programs that we can support, and that are uh, friendly to solar as well. Um,
Yeah.
and I think we've had a lot of good fortune in that. And so yeah, I'm grateful, especially for our utility partners and their
Yeah.
support.
Makes sense. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the way California and Hawaii evolved, if it evolves like that in lower rate states, utilities will be generally, my expectation is that they're going to be quite friendly to solar for the first 3 to 5% of penetration, because it actually helps them. After 5% penetration, then it starts to become more of a burden, especially if you're doing this for LMI market segments. You're not really stealing much business from them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, many of these utilities have their own clean energy goals, have their own equity goals, and
Yeah,
so we can support them with both.
yeah,
And like you sort of just hinted at, I mean, the multifamily demographic, they are often the first to be hit when there is a brownout or a blackout.
yeah,
And so it's also an incredible opportunity to kind of rebuild goodwill and rebuild trust between multifamily customers and the utility.
yeah. Makes sense. So if we were to talk a little bit about what's in the horizon for Allume this year, next year, what are some exciting things coming out of Allume, and like new things, new initiatives you guys are driving for the US market and beyond? We can talk about that.
Well, what can I say? Yeah, I think we are especially, excited about some of these, what I would say perhaps more durable state programs, in this current environment where like the federal programs are,
Yeah,
it's very hard to understand. It just changes on a daily basis.
sure.
Um, we are working on different iterations of the product, which I'm very excited about. And I think it's going to help us come into different markets as well.
Hmm.
Um, and then we're just, yeah,
Can you talk about those, or are they like
I
bigger
don't,
than?
I don't think so. I don't
Not
know.
yet? Okay. All right. Yeah, totally okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
When you're ready, we'll do another one of these conversations, and we'll announce that
yeah,
on Solar
I would love,
Conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it should, hopefully it's not, it's soon.
Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, and I think, in this environment that we are all in, where there's so much uncertainty and
Hmm.
the need to give confidence to customers is even greater.
Yeah.
And also the need to stick by certain values is really critical. I'm, I'm really glad and grateful that we are really sticking by those values, that we want to share power, literally and figuratively.
Hmm.
Um, we want to be serving low income communities. We want people to feel that and know that clean energy is for them and that they can benefit from it. And I think more and more people are just recognizing the potential that this has, especially in this political landscape
Yeah.
and financially. Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, I think we covered most of the points we wanted to talk about. in this call intro, I would say intro to Allume Energy. One question that I had for you is when you are educating your partners, whether they are utilities, EPCs, installers, real estate developers, um, how many hours is that training usually? Is it multiple conversations of 1 hour? Is it 1 8-hour training that you deliver in person? Um, I'm asking this from a self-serving perspective a little bit because we believe, both Nico and I, my partner in SolarAcademy, Nico Johnson of Suncast, and I, we believe a lot of selling is education. And so we're trying to innovate in our own way. Just what else can we do besides just interviewing people like I'm interviewing you now, and we'll publish pretty much the full conversation with no edits or
Mhm.
minor edits. But what else can we do to accelerate your education process for your market?
So I think one of my colleagues Ernest puts it very well, in that, when you hear about a new technology, it's
Yeah,
kind of like hearing like a song for the first time on a radio where you're like, huh, okay, well, like, whatever.
yeah,
And then if you keep hearing the song over and over and over again, you're like, oh yeah, yeah, I like this song.
yeah,
Yeah, this works. And
yeah,
I do think that's also part of the education and
yeah, sure.
is um, like hearing about it and being familiar enough with it to start trusting it. And I think that
Yeah,
comes with both, some repetition, but also just like seeing the
effect or
first impact and account from people who have benefited.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think, yeah, if we can continue to show impact, that's our
So
strategy.
maybe in one of our future recordings, we can interview a building owner or a te community of tenants along with an installer that put in the solution.
Yeah,
We believe video content like that is super helpful.
yeah, I think they're even better um, evangelists than I would be.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, people who are seeing the direct benefits, um, and I think even me, like when I get to hear from them, I get so excited, uh,
yeah,
and so
makes
yeah,
sense.
contagious in a way.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that question for me.
Yeah.
Um, any last words as we conclude? Anything you wish from the universe that can come your way? How should people reach out to you if they have questions?
They can reach out to me via my email, Aliya, Aliya, at Allume, Allume, energy.com.
Hmm.
And yeah, be happy to, take questions and share more. I think what I want to put out into the universe right now for people who are working in the clean energy and equity space is um, to stay strong, and to, yeah, hold on and like form communities and continue what they're doing,
Yeah,
whether or not you get public support. Yeah, because I think we've seen enough to know that this is beneficial and it's worth the struggle.
yeah. With the just the general trends of the solar industry, nothing can stop this industry. There's no doubt about that.
Definitely,
And yeah,
definitely.
yeah, great. Aliya, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and info and giving us an insight into Allume, which is definitely a needed solution in the market.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.